journey, growing freely, no ceiling, no roof. Going deep with no stones to entangle my roots like they do.
Waking up tired and waiting for the horizon to appear. Remind me this work is all for love again. Looking ahead, I see hope in the sky. Give me access and I won't be denied. I won't let go, just hold tight to my hand. The world that we knew would return here. Living my dream without no fear.
You're the will wipe away all tears.
I hate that my hands can't touch you. My arms and soul hold to the memories and dreams. Know in my heart that I won't let go. Misery every day, hard to be unafraid. Everything is not the same no more. Policies stay the same. They should be ashamed. They should try to hide their face. There is a light that I'm chasing in life. It won't be put out. Thankful I'm alive. Ready or not, I will rise to a brighter day. A world without wars that divide us. Grateful for all of them.
The International Festival of Arts and Ideas is created and produced on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scaticoke, Golden Hill Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac, in the land we all call home, Connecticut. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the native people whose land you are on and the history of the place you are in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Festival 2021, the Year of Imagine. This year, our programming explores the world both as it is today and how it can be in the future. My name is Shelley Kiala, and I'm the Executive Director of the festival, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event and our official kickoff to the 2021 NEA Big Read in New Haven. You can tell that I'm ready to celebrate with this hat, which is not only a costume piece, but is also a literary tool. You might recognize the book that I have up here, Joy Harjo's An American Sunrise, and we'll be talking more about that in just a minute. But first, I want to thank the supporters who have made it possible for us to be here today. We are very grateful to the NEA, who in partnership with Arts Midwest, worked with additional support from the David T. Langrock Foundation, Connecticut Public, and our 2021 Ideas partner, the Connecticut Humanities. They all have supported us so that we could bring this to you today. This event and the festival as a whole are also made possible through the generosity of people like you. That enables us to provide more than 95% of the programming free of charge this year. It's the most that I know we've done in recent history. So please consider joining our community of supporters with a gift of any amount today at artidea.org/donate. You can also support the festival and help us tell our story by participating in the Quinnipiac University Arts and Ideas Audience Survey. It takes just a few minutes, and it's available in both English and Spanish on our website at artidea.org/survey. Now it's my pleasure to introduce colleagues from our partner organizations in the Big Read. Kirk Morrison from the NHFPL New Haven Free Public Library, and Margaret Ann Tachakowski from the New Haven Museum. Kirk, over to you.
Thank you, Shelley. My name is Kirk Morrison, and I'm the manager at the New Haven Free Public Library's Fairhaven branch. Thanks so much for joining us. This is NHFPL's 5th year of presenting the NEA Big Read in partnership with the festival and the New Haven Museum. The Big Read is a nationwide program of the National Endowment of the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest that broadens our understanding of our world, our communities, and ourselves through the joy of sharing a good book. Please also remember that at each NHFPL location, there are companion books to An American Sunrise for young minds and teen readers, and you can check out the full list of Big Read titles by visiting nhfpl.org/bigread2021.
Hello, my name is Margaret Ann Tachakowski, Executive Director of the New Haven Museum. We are so excited to hear U.S. Poet Laureate and American Sunrise author Joy Harjo in conversation with theater maker Madeline Sayet. Poetry as an art form is so important because it can provide a different method through which we express and consider ideas, encouraging the reader to connect and find meaning in our experiences. Poetry can also have a positive impact on the social and emotional learning of children. It may offer them a new way of thinking about something. It can put things into words that children may not know how to express otherwise. Poetry encourages children to express themselves and their feelings. Please share your questions for Joy and Madeline, chat with others, or say hi to everyone by commenting in the YouTube or Facebook event page chat. We also invite you to join us for other Big Read events over the coming month, including Listening to Earth, Indigenous Wisdom and Climate Futures on May 26th at 5 p.m., Eat Local, Indigenous Cooking with Rachel Sayet on May 27th at 7 p.m., Indigenous Writers of Connecticut on June 3rd at 5 p.m. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elizabeth Nearing. I am the curator of ideas programming at the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. And last year, we had the opportunity to talk about democracy and the systems at play right now, the way that they do and do not serve us. And this year, we're excited to delve into the idea of imagining new futures and old futures and the ways that we get to be together. So I'm thrilled to be able to be the person to introduce all of you watching to the incredible Mohegan director, playwright, former TED Fellow, Forbes 30 Under 30, Madeline Sayet, who will be in conversation with the U.S. Poet Laureate, Joy Harjo. Madeline and Joy, welcome. Have a blast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cha Natiwis Chokais. Hi, everybody. I'm Maddie. I'm so excited to be here zooming in from home on my traditional lands at Mohegan and to get to talk with Joy Harjo, which is just such an honor I can't even begin to express. I just want to reiterate that, I will be asking some questions, but that we will also be incorporating questions from all of you. So really do feel free to put those questions in the chat. Joy, so my first question is, first of all, I know your words are medicine for so many, including myself, in the way that a single word, let alone a phrase, can inspire, awaken, and really help us examine our blood, our memory, the lands that we stand on, and the way everything is layered and interconnected. What was the journey of this particular book coming together for you? Where did it begin? I guess, where did it end up? And did you ever imagine originally that these poems would come together in this form? So I'm just curious about what the journey of this piece coming together was.
Now, which piece was that? Because there was a little breaking
American
up.
Sunrise. Sorry, American Sunrise. Because of the big read conversation. Yeah, it could be. You're right. I would have loved to ask that question about any one of yours. So good question. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying.
So it's about you. So anyway, I'm sorry, I still didn't get the question.
No, it's fine. It's just this book that is on Shelley's hat.
Yes.
Specifically. The poems that are in it and the way that they came together, did you envision them coming together in any way, or what was the journey of creating this particular book?
Okay, good. Now I can, it's my, so that book came about when I was in, I had a chair of excellence at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and it was down in our homeland area. Our people were in Alabama, Georgia, all the way up into Tennessee and so on. And the rivers were our roadways. So the Tennessee River came right up, and there's a story that they tell in our family that Manawa, or Manawi, people call him either way, my 6th generation great-grandfather came up to Knoxville with his warriors looking for horses to steal, but they were on our land, so they weren't really stealing them. But I got hired anyway. I told that story in my when I was being interviewed. But that book came together when I was writing a new book of poetry. Was last on my list. I have a play I have all these things I'm working on, and yet I was filled with this sense of contradiction because we were in the southeast part of our homelands, and I mean, it was strange to go back and our people weren't there. They're in Oklahoma. There were and, places. We went all over. We went places all over the southeast, and we had stories. My husband and I, he's also Muscogee Creek. And I'm thinking, we're getting ready to go home to Oklahoma, and we're so happy to be going home. And yet our people are here, and part of my heart is here. And how do I deal with that contradiction? With being in these places where we have family stories, and I can tell you things that went on in all these places. And then we were moved illegally at gunpoint to Indian Territory or Oklahoma. And yet I'm excited about home. It seemed like
Hi, everyone. There are some thunderstorms.
I'm sorry, I guess that's me going. There's a storm, okay? We'll make the storm part of the story.
Joy, we may need you to go back a little bit
out here, and we're going to ask the connection to anyway. So the book came about, and a lot of poems come about. Okay.
I'm getting bits and pieces. So there's Joy. There's a big storm. Oh, now as soon as I talk, there you go.
Here's his number. You guys.
We have lost audio and you are frozen. So we need to pop off and pop back on. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Maddie, and everyone watching. I don't know if you all were able to hear, but there is a big storm moving through the lands where Joy is calling from. So we are pausing for a moment to give her the opportunity to hop on and then hop back off. Madeline, I didn't mean to jump in.
I was torn because I kept wanting to hear what she said, so I didn't want to interrupt, even though it was frozen. I was like, maybe the words will get through somehow.
We're gonna find the words. The anticipation was even richer with the pause. So
if you could pull up, it's on Spotify in America. I wanted to play the song in American Sunrise. So if somebody can pull that up and play it, I could pull it up here and play it, but then you wouldn't hear me if I go off. But just in case, if someone could do that. and it's new. It's from my new album, I Pray for My Enemies, which is also a little bit of a part of this story. So where do I go? Uh-oh. Are you there? Am I there? Am I here?
You're still there.
Yeah. Thank you. It's part of, so I go to poetry for contradictions. Probably all the writers or artists are, you know, how do I, it's not really, it's about the questions. And I had a lot of questions, and I didn't know where to put being happy to go home and yet leaving homelands that our people's fought so hard to stay, because, you know, those are the places we plan our songs, our stories, and they come from those places. And that's how American came about.
Thank you.
And the form of it, of course, was, you know, okay, here I am. I go back to Say and his book, The Way to Rainy Mountain. Yeah, I go back to The Way to Rainy Mountain as a way to organize using traditional Native ideas. You know, he has several voices in that book. There's the mythical voice. There's the I am here now poetry telling the story voice, and there's historical moments. And that informs a lot the shape of this book of poetry. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that so beautiful in the book, the way that you wove in other voices into what you were creating, and also that phrase that you just said, I go to poetry for the way of holding the contradictions. I feel like I'm gonna think about that for a lot after this. So thank you for that. Is there anything in particular, knowing that so many people specifically are reading and discussing this book as part of the big read right now, is there anything in particular that you hope people get out of that discussion of being in process with your poems here?
Probably that history is real and it's made out of people. You know, we hear these stories, news stories all the time, and sometimes they can just go through us or around us, and we forget that there's real people with stories, people who are, you know, everyone has a story, even people we pass on the street who might, you know, homeless people who, everyone has a story. They may not know how to tell it, or they may not have the right language in the language that everyone is hearing. You know, maybe the story, there's places I can go where the story doesn't fit at all, you know, where my story might not fit at all. But yeah, everyone has a story and everyone is part of history. I know I grew up thinking that history, you know, was created, you know, that are the records of history that we have, for a lot of us have, for the most part, is what's been written by certain people who have a certain outlook on history. When if you were to go into a scene, and we know this, if there's a traumatic event and you interview people, everyone will say, no, it was a red car. No, it was a white car. No, he was on a motorcycle. You know, you'll get that. And who's telling, you know, everybody sees it a little bit differently. And so I think about that, I've thought about doing a book like that, you know, of one incident. And I know it's been done. I always really appreciated Louise Erdrich's Love Medicine, the way that she told the story of a community. Basically, with I like hearing all of the voices, and even the voice of the fly in the room, even the voice of the earth underneath. There's a lot of layers of history. As you know, the land acknowledgement, I was thinking of those peoples and I thought, man, this group's going to tell the story a lot different than this group, you know.
Yeah.
And there's layers and layers of history. So, and so that's what I tried doing. I try to make each book a kind of oral event, because all poetry, all stories, theater, everything it comes out of oral tradition.
Yeah. Thinking about what you just said, I think it's interesting. There's a couple moments in two different poems where history is referenced. One, and just in lines I thought were very powerful. One was, history will always find you and wrap you in its 1,000 arms. And the other was, it was my way of breaking through free. I was anything but history. I was the wind. And it was making me think about this question of do you think it's possible to break free of history? And like, I don't know. I don't even know why I wanted to ask that question. I think it just, there was something about our relationship to history in those lines that was very striking to me.
Yeah, that I think trying to run was my way of trying to break free of history. I actually did that. I would run through, well, to get home. It was kind of dangerous. And then I would just run. When I was younger like that, I would just, if I was going through something, and I'm not a runner, by the way, I would just run. And there was something about trying to break free of that which was burdening. And history can burden us. So we have to find a way so that it doesn't, one, destroy us, so that we can use the materials of history to create a world that will be supportive of that which is compassionate, that which is nourishing in a way. Yeah. I wanted to say something too before we go on, so that people don't think that I have a picture of a roulette wheel in my house. I'm in a hotel room in Louisiana on the Coshada Reservation. So that's what this is not my house. Anyway,
I didn't even realize that was in the picture.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the.
Thanks, Joy. Thank you for that clarification also.
I guess I shouldn't be concerned about what people, it's just, this is not my house. And I'm down here in Louisiana.
Well, people do, they take it very seriously too, now that everything's online, what people have in their houses. People will be analyzing, oh, what does this mean about Joy that she has this roulette wheel? So it's good to clarify.
Well, I thought about getting photographs of incredible libraries all over the world. I got to go to W.S. Merwin's house. He's got, he's passed now, but they're going to make his house into a retreat. Beautiful library. And I thought I should photograph, because when it started, every is in front of these incredible libraries. And I thought I should photograph these libraries and put a different one up each time. But anyway, all that to say too, there's all kinds of libraries, and they're not all books. That's one kind of library, but then the stones are a kind of library of history, geological history, which has a lot to do with us. It just runs on a different time perception. There's libraries in the wind. There's libraries, and I think that's in one of the poems, how to write a poem in a time of war. There's libraries, just layered, all kinds of libraries of knowledge.
We have a question from the chat. If you could speak more about the play that you're working on right now.
Yes, that I'm supposed to be working on. It's called We Were There When, We Were There When Jazz Was Invented, which is the initial impulse was to write a musical play, so that music, it's not in the Western tradition of musical, but so that music runs through it. The characters mostly speak. There will be some singing, but it's not. It's sort of like a regular play with a soundtrack going on. And it's a story. I wanted to write a story so that to shift the origin story of blues and jazz to include Southeastern Native people. And so I have a young band in Tulsa, really cool band members from Lunchmeat who plays drums, and he's like that down-home guy, full-blood Creek Indian who everybody goes to. He's kind of like the story keeper. The protagonist is Justice Fields, who's heading up the band, and he's like he's a poet musician who, or he might just be a poet, like poet singer, but he's really and wants to investigate, why he hears our music. When you hear our stomp dance, you can hear blues and jazz. All the elements of blues and jazz are in our traditional music. And so he sets out on this to find these pieces. His mother goes missing. She's like a missing and probably murdered, because she's investigating why their place gets taken by an oil company. This is going on in present time, not just a long time ago. And he'll find out who his father was. He thinks his father is someone else. He's got kind of a stepfather from New Orleans, from the Congo Square area, which was considered kind of the naval court place of blues and jazz. Most people don't know that a Homa village was on that site, so that when the African people were there and they were let out every Sunday, that's where they go to other Native people. And that's part of anyway, there's a whole band, really wonderful characters in this band, and all of these stories branching out, and each of them will have a piece of the story of blues and jazz, as each of them has their own story going on. So anyway, I'm ready to do a revision. I've got support to get started on this, to continue, because I have a draft, but I have all the notes for a redraft. And it's anyway, I'm excited about it. And my song, "An American Sunrise," might be one of the songs, might wind up being one of the songs in the play. So
I'm just curious, listening to you speak, when you started writing, I just keep thinking about the Big Read, and that there's a lot of educational components and a lot of youth involved. And so I'm just curious, because I can't help but think of you as like, Joy Harjo, already like, master of words in this really powerful way. But when you first began writing, I'm just curious, like, was your relationship to song and words always connected? Like, how did it begin for you?
It came from music.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I came to poetry, is through my mother's songwriting, and being intrigued with a big Underwood typewriter on the table, which we weren't supposed to touch. So it became, you can make words on it and how could a child not? It was the most interesting thing in the whole house, was that typewriter. But this was before she had all the 4 children and then went to work, and then she walked away from music. But she used to go out and make demos and sing, and I loved that. And she wrote the words, and I loved speaking with music. I mean, I love the idea of like singing and words. I would say words over and over and so on. But I didn't start writing poetry until I was almost 22 or 23. But that's how I came to poetry. And she loved the music in poetry. She had an 8th grade education, but she brought a lot from that. They used to, in her generation, they memorized poems. And so she knew a lot of William Blake poems. Little Lamb, the Little Lamb, what is that? The tiger, tiger burning bright in the forest of the night. There's such music in those poems, and then her songs, which were all about heartbreak, sort of like Patsy Cline heartbreak stuff. And but yeah, that's how my ear for poetry started. But I loved reading poetry. But for years I thought, well, all of these poets, I thought all the poets I read lived in England or someplace like that. And it never struck me that natives could write poets, and because I never heard of any natives or poetry. It's different now, and I hope kids hear different now. But and that's what got me started writing, is that, wow, there's Leslie Silko's writing poetry, and James Welch, and wow, in Scott Day, all of these people are poets. Did it freeze again?
froze a little bit. I could still hear what you were saying.
Let's see.
You're back. Oh wait, are you frozen?
Okay, good. Okay, we're on. Okay, we're on. Okay, went into hyperspace there.
No.
But I'm back. I bring you greetings. Yeah.
Welcome.
Anyway, is it freezing again?
It's coming in and out. Hold still for like 1 moment and let's see if it comes back. Gonna give it some time to. Oh yeah, you're coming back. It worked. I didn't expect that to work.
Okay.
Okay, you're back now.
Yeah, I'll just go real slow motion and. Yeah. Okay.
You were talking. Okay. Are you frozen or are you? I think you're frozen. The internet, it's amazing, but it's also,
okay.
It's not
Anyway,
amazing.
that's how my poetry. That's how it began. Really, the thought of writing poetry and. Okay. Can you hear me?
It's coming in and out. I don't know if there's anything we can do. It's completely frozen now, the video on my side. Joy, can you try turning off your camera and
Okay. I mean,
it's all gone now.
Better. Just did. Okay.
Yeah, I think
really, but you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can hear you. Now we can hear you
Hello?
better. Yeah. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, we'll keep going. Okay.
Yeah, that was really before it cut out. That was actually really fun too to hear about the image of you finding poetry on the typewriter, because there's a sense of play to that, as a kid, to be able to type on those buttons you weren't supposed to. You were talking about all of the inspirational Native poets that we get to hear about now, and I know you put together an anthology of Native poetry, and I just was thinking about the significance of that, and I was curious if you had any thoughts about why you did that, or how it came together, or the writers whose voices you were so excited to include in that anthology.
Oh yeah, the anthology. Actually, I have two out, but there's When the Light of the World Was Subdued, our songs came through, a Norton anthology of Native nations poetry, and that I'd wanted to put together a Norton anthology of Native literature because there has not been such a thing. And they said, well, we actually want we would actually like to have a book of Native poetry, and pulled together an incredible team of poets. I decided, when I was growing up and going to the university, all of the Norton anthologies we used always had this list of experts, and I thought the experts for this anthology are all Native poets. And anyway, we decided we had an impossible task. We have 75 federally recognized tribes, and some that aren't federal, some state recognized tribes who are legitimate Native Hawaiians. And then first we were given 300 pages to do an anthology from time immemorial until now. And then it went up to, yes, well, slowly grew. We got a little over 400 pages. And, but you can imagine.
Should we have her try to call in?
Hi, everyone. I'm calling Joy now, and we're going to try a phone connection. Hello. Okay, I'm going to put you on speakerphone, and we're going to try this another way. We can do this. Here. All right,
Okay.
let's give it a go.
Okay, great. So, all
right, let's give it a go.
Oh,
Can you, let's see.
Is there a way she can try to
let me turn the sound there. How's
yes,
that?
if you turn the sound off so there's no echo, then we're good.
Okay. Now, where were we in all of this?
You were, thank you, Joy. Also, thank you for your patience with the technology. I feel like I'm hearing hearing something really good and then it cuts out. So it's like so much more anticipation. You were talking about the anthology and you were beginning to talk about the process of putting it together and how you had wanted it to be all Native literature, but they wanted poetry. And so if you could just continue from there, that would be awesome.
Right. Well, it was quite a task. We assembled the excellent editors, and we decided to arrange it according to area. And that's why we divided it into 5 geographical areas. And what we learned from that is how different it was for the politically, actually, and then even in natural imagery, when you went from Northeast Midwest, which was the first geographical area, to the plains and mountains, and then to the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, Hawaii, then west, southwest, and then around to southeast. In those huge, those are huge swaths of areas, and a lot of different tribes in each area, and each one with very different languages and cultures and so on. But I think that way worked because we're so rooted to land. Our cultures are very land-based, and so I think that worked. And we did a lot of reading, and it was difficult because we had, to fit libraries and libraries of literature into a very small area. So we couldn't put everyone in that wanted to be in or who deserved to be in. And we just, had to try to we put together an anthology that I think works pretty well to showcase indigenous literature, native people's literature of the U.S.
There's a question from the audience about whether you think that the fact that many cities have chosen to read American Sunrise for part of the Big Read has impacted, if you think that that's impacted folks' education or youth's education about indigenous peoples.
I think so. I think so. I've always put my books together a little bit differently, and an American Sunrise kind of builds on that. Mm-hmm. So that there's a sense of orality, and also it gives a sense of, Native peoples and so on, and these anthology coming on the heels of that, because right after American Sunrise was published, this anthology came out, and then a few weeks ago, the anthology for the project for the Library of Congress of 47 contemporary poets, Living Nations, Living Words, came out. But this has all come after. I think of a sequence of events with Standing Rock and the national and attention that came to with that here we are making a stand on behalf of the earth in the middle of the Western Hemisphere. It's all symbolic, but it's all, it's like, here's the story. We're all here. We're one people, and what happens in this area, how we stand, and what we're standing for will affect the quality of life of not just our children, but your children. And then that was followed up by Deb Holland being Deb and I'm trying to think of the other woman from Kansas, the congresswoman from Kansas, who also, the two of them became the first Native women congresswomen, and that was huge. And then I was appointed first Native U.S. Poet Laureate, which opened the door. It opened the door of awareness. I think, of Native people. It was, beyond me. It opened and said, wait, here's a Native person who's a poet. Wow, you mean there are there, there's more Native poets. It's not just me. So that was a door of awareness. And now Deb Haaland was appointed Secretary of Interior. That was massive. So an American Sunrise is just part of a larger opening up of this American story. And how can we have an American story without the stories and the presence of indigenous peoples? And yet you don't see us in the in the American story field. Mm-hmm. You don't hear from us. And even it was at CNN recently had a sign up on there, naming, here's the blacks, Hispanic, Asians, and then they called us something else. Mm-hmm. And that was very, very telling. And it's time. There will be no America. There will be no fully realized America without indigenous, the presence and the stories and the gifts and what we have to offer as the original keepers of these lands. We will not, we are all in a healing story. In essence, this whole country, we are in a healing. We were brought together for a reason. I don't know the larger. There's things we do not know, but we do know that we're all here, and there is a larger reason for this. And we have to work out. We have to work out a story in which we all have a place. And so, yeah, we all. I don't know how it's going to work out. Sharice Davids, thank you, as the other congresswoman, who is wonderful. So, yeah, so then here we are, the poets, the writers, the artists, the singers, the performers. We're the ones that kind of walk ahead or walk point in the cultural story field to see what's out there and to bring back what can't be imagined yet. What we can see the glimmerings of, that's the role of poets and writers and musicians and so on, is that we're listening ahead, and even as we're listening way, way, way back.
Joy, there are people in the comment section begging for a poem to be read if you were willing. I also know you're in a hotel room, and I don't know what your access is to your own work at this moment, but if possible, they are begging for the possibility of a poem to be read, which you might reject, of course.
Yeah, on my iPhone. I wish we could play somebody could play an American Sunrise on there, because then you could hear it.
I think they couldn't figure it out. There was a conversation about it in the chat to try and figure it out, and they couldn't figure out how to. They sent the link to the audience, but they couldn't figure out how to play it.
Yeah, I play it. Yeah, I play it all the time I'm afraid to turn it on. I mean, it's moving fine so far, but then I'd have to hang up here, and I've already hung people up too much in time. I'll just do a short poem, because I also have a new song in my album, I Pray for My Enemies. And it's the poem this morning, I Pray for My Enemies. And so I can read that, it's short. Yeah. And he goes, this morning I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing, even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. Thank you. That's hard to translate a poem without seeing it first. And I don't know your name, the woman who's translating, but thank you. I can see you. I just have the sound turned off on the computer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, and also thank you for translating. That was really powerful, and it was making me think again, Joy, about your amazing ability to hold. I pray for my enemies, to hold contradiction within like your phrasing and your the way your heart holds all of these ideas together. Has there ever been? This is just a strange question, but has there ever been, or is there currently, a contradiction that you feel like you're really grappling with through your poetry that feels very present at this moment?
Oh man, that's a good question. Well, as you were talking, and I'm not sure I have an answer to that. I mean, there's a lot of, I think what is it? Chris Christopherson, he's a good songwriter. You know, he in one of his songs, he was something, I'm partly truth, I'm a walking contradiction, partly truth, partly fiction. And I always responded to that because I have felt like that all my life. You know, I have, I don't know that I look or act like all the other poets. I always felt like I'm a poet, but I've been to other countries and stuff, and there's a certain way poets are with a certain kind of bearing, and I don't have that. Some people don't think I look native. Other natives know me and know that I do. That's another contradiction. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a different time space, like I'm young and I'm old. I think some of us go through that. The contradiction of what came to mind, and I hadn't thought of it this way at all until now, is I think of contradiction. So to have a contradiction, you have like two oppositions that need to fit in the same kind of space. And then I'm thinking about how in our Mvskoke community and in the Muskogee philosophy is, and a lot of indigenous kind of the basis of the philosophies are usually twinnings or duals. How do you we have red towns and white towns which deal with two different kinds of, one is about how you go out, one is like civil, the other is sort of like the House of Representatives and the House of the Senators, but not quite that. It's not quite that. It's sort of like having a council of men, a council of women, but that's not how it was divided. I'm kind of riffing here, but it's about harmony or having balance. That's what it is, about balance. So much of our ceremonies and our ways of thinking are about how do you find balance. And so it makes me think about that with contradictions, because you're in a contradiction, you're also in a way looking for a balance, but at the same time, how do you do with that with keeping the power within each side? I don't even want to use the word side, and I don't know what word I would use instead of side. And that's thinking aloud. That's just kind of thinking, but it's got me. That's helpful. That's helpful for me to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It was also making me wonder. I find a lot. I don't know. Sometimes there's this tendency of like non-natives to try and take contradictions and turn them into one thing or the other, and be like, no, it can't. The two things can't exist at the same time. And I was just curious if you'd ever experienced anyone trying to create or to force binaries into your work, if you've ever come up against that, or people are like, well, which is it? And you're like, no, it can't, has to be both. Again, this is like a question. So it's just something that I was curious about, especially with plays, I think, because I think about plays a lot and the way people are always trying to impose structure from outside sometimes on things.
Right. Well, there's that worn out trope of, India living in two worlds. The whole thing, we're living in two worlds and all of that. Well, I think I walk through a lot of worlds. I walk through a lot of worlds, or I don't know. I'm having to think about that. I don't know that I have a good answer for that right now, because I know people have written about my work, but I haven't read a lot of that.
Yeah. You can ignore them, so that's good actually. Yeah, because as a poet, you can't be censored as easily in some ways as certain other mediums. So that's good.
Right, but I have had to deal with people with stereotypes.
Mm.
I almost got into a knockdown drag out with an interviewer in Berlin, Germany once, who was putting words into my mouth. I was getting angry because I wouldn't feed back. I would not feed back stereotypes. And he kept demanding that I do this. And I kept saying, no, that's not the way it is. We're many tribes, because they want us all to be some kind of Wild West show Plains native. And people, I've tried to figure out, those are so rooted and destructive even. And I think a lot of us have, a lot of us living Native artists try to figure out what can shift that? Why is that so powerful? And, how can we shift that so that they see we're human beings? I remember being young when I first started writing poetry, and I was painting then at that time too, and thinking, when I get to the end of my life, one thing I hope that my work contributes to the world seeing Native peoples as human beings. That is so basic. My grandmother played saxophone in Indian Territory. Put that in your collection of images of natives. Deb Holland, Secretary of Interior. That's a big one. That'll pull out some of those stereotypical roots right there. We just plant something that's powerful and will feed the people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like so much of your work, for me reading it growing up, has always felt like a kind of liberation, like your ability to get, I guess it's I'm trying to think of the right word for it. I unfortunately am not as good with words as you, but it's the ability to kind of like get rid of the nonsense and free yourself of it and really like fully express is just so profound that even like reading your words, I've always felt like it was liberating just to read them. So I'm just so grateful for that and everything that you've done throughout your years as a writer. I'm curious about, and again, I am also riffing a little bit, so I'm sorry if some of the questions are not as clear also. So I appreciate your patience with that, Joy. I'm curious about thinking about American Sunrise again, since that's what so many folks, listening have most recently read. I'm thinking about kinship ties within the piece and the way that they link throughout it. And I was just curious how you were thinking about. There's so much layering. There's so much like really beautiful layering of what that means throughout this book. And I was just curious if there was anything that came to mind for you in terms of how you were thinking about kinship in American Sunrise.
I always go back to that image from NASA of the Earth as this incredible being shining. It was shining with life, and how that affected and shifted the whole. That's when the term holistic came about. That's when environment, that we started hearing environmental, was when that image surfaced in the culture. And so to me, that would be a root image of familial ties. Another one would be recently, on Facebook, I found this. It's a picture of a cell. And so much of my image of a cell was like, you see these drawings, there's a cell, there's a nucleus, a little picture of, nucleus and so on. But this image taken with one of those, incredible microscopes, an image taken with this, oh my gosh, it's a community. There are all kinds of things going on in that cell there's DNA and there's places we haven't explored yet. It's like going into the deepest part of an ocean. And there it is, the cell. You can see that the cell is a living being and is quite amazing. And so I think about that as familial, as well as I think with poetry, there is a layering in the poems, because I feel like one of the major tools that a poet has is time. So that in a poem, there's often past, present, and future moving around. But it's the same way in our consciousness. We might be present here, listening and speaking with each other, but there's also our memories, as the memories of, I don't want to think of what went on in this hotel room. But, there's memories. There's all kinds of layers of time and event going on. Or I'm looking across at some flowers that were brought in here and what they remember, and how they came to be there and what earth they're longing for. I mean, that's what happens with me in a poem, is that I start exploring all of these ties of relationship, I guess is what you would call it.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, especially because like at the very, very, very end, you end with "We are the land," which seems like it could be a straightforward sentence, but everything that's built into that, that we are the land, and the history and the stories, and not just the earth that we're made up of, but also like all of the layers of what that land is and has come to mean, and that you've pulled out at that point, going through that collection of poems. I just feel like is really, really powerful. Are there any other questions from the audience? Does the audience have anything else they want to say? I encourage you to bring us your questions. Is there anything you're working on that you're really excited about right now, or anything that that you've encountered recently that really like is sitting on your heart in some way?
Well, today I went and finished, along with my assistant Jennifer Forrester, who is also an editor of the anthology, the second go round of corrections for Poet Warrior. And that's my new memoir that will be out in September. And in the memoir, I'm kind of standing from where I am now, looking back at the stories, looking back at the teachers and the teaching moments, and the stories that got me to where I am. So there's all kinds of stories in here. I was trying to think of what I could read that would relate directly. I mean, it all relates. I was going to say I probably started writing some of this with An American Sunrise, but I don't.
I think people are grateful for anything. I feel like everything you say and do, everyone is grateful for. So if there's anything, even if it's not reading something, it's sharing a little bit about a part of a story that you're working on in that, I'm sure we'd all be,
Yes. So one thing that happened was I had this little piece here, is that, some of these I have, I have another memoir, Crazy Brave. And then somebody was reading it and said, but some of these stories or parts of them appeared in Crazy Brave. And I said, yes, they do, but it's different. I tell them, it's sort of like when we live through a story or history, something happens in history, in our personal history or even national history, we keep taking that story in, and so we retell it, and there's different ways of telling it. And so I put this paragraph in here to say something like that. Well, like you might hear some of these stories again, but this is how we process things. I have told some of these stories many times, and you may have heard some or most of them already. Memory can compress and expand. Arms and legs can stick out. Some stories are demanding. They will find no rest until they are told once more, like a child wanting to hear the same story over and over again, even though they know how it's going to end. The stories tap you on the shoulder, pull you at your shirt, begging for attention again. The more years you gather, the more stories you have that want to be retold. But it's the same ones that often haunt you. It's why It's why we return to our childhood home over and over again in memory, in the same rooms, the same lands, the same songs on the radio. And so in a way, that's sort of like, an American sunrise. It's sort of like being haunted by a place that was always there in memory, our homelands, but not there, and hearing these stories and thinking these things, and they needed a place and a place to live.
That's beautiful. Thank you. It was also making me think about, there was a scientist at some point that was explaining to me that actually each time we remember something, there's something about the way that memory actually has to rebuild itself each time. That was just very thinking about what you were describing in terms of, it's like every time we go back, it's a little different. It's shifting. It shifts with us as we move through time. The audience. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I found another piece that talks about that, but go ahead if there's a question.
I'm gonna ask the question after you read what you were gonna read.
Okay.
I'm curious about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is a short piece. I strained to hold on to the back of my father's jean pockets to keep him off my mother. This was my first act of justice. It was not clean cut. I loved my father. This is contradictions too and memory. I loved my father as much as I loved my mother. I still hear the echo as her head slams against the tile bathroom wall as he shakes her in a rage that began long before their marriage and at its root has nothing to do with her. Where within me do I continue to hold that contradiction? What do I do with this overwhelming need for justice in my family, for my tribal nation, for those of us in this country who have been written out of the story, or those of us who appear to be destroyed or perverted by false story? I have learned there are many genealogies. Within our family is a genealogy of rage. There is also a genealogy of justice. I would show you the map, but I am still searching the roadway for casualties. Maybe I can save them. I do not know when rage will end or how justice will find its resting place. I do not want to be haunted by that which I cannot speak, or by that which is by nature unspeakable. The truth will not be uncovered soon enough, cried a mother when her baby was shot holding a pretend gun in his baby hand while he was playing in the park by a man who believed he was given dominion over all of the earth because of the color of his skin, because of how much money he had in the bank, or because of his religion. So that's one little piece that kind of expands on what we've been talking about.
Yep, definitely. Thank you. There's a question that I'm curious, also having just heard that, and thinking about our moment in time and the world. There's a question from the audience. Is there a subject or subjects or themes that you find yourself wanting to write about, but haven't found the words yet? I recognize it might be hard to answer the question because answering it would require some words, but
right. Oh man, I'm thinking about a third memoir, but I won't write it for a little while. And I'm thinking, what would I put in there? And of course, I'm thinking of what I want my kids to know, that all of the things this is part of it, but there's particular lessons. I mean, the very particular lessons with ways to approach them, different ways, according to the different ways that I've been taught by all different kinds of teachers through the years. So it would be a little bit different concept and shape. But as far as there's things I don't want to write about. I mean, there's things that are personal. I know a lot of memoirs wind up being like tell-alls, and I'm sure there's things people would want to know, but it's not anybody else's business. Interesting.
There's another question from the audience about what is what have you sort of, I guess, not learned, but what is it that you're taking away from the past year? A lot of people have been asking this a lot, I'm sure, but this year of the pandemic, if it's shifted anything, if there's any particular kinds of stories you've been drawn to telling within this time of the pandemic.
I wrote this memoir during the pandemic. It's actually getting published fairly quickly. And it was difficult not to despair, like everyone, thinking about what the mess we had gotten ourselves into. And yet when I was young, when I could, and it wasn't very often, I liked to sit in those circles of Native healers and thinkers to hear. And, they talked about predictions. They talked about the mess we would get ourselves into if we didn't listen and didn't take care of things. And then they also, I just like the other kinds of stories. But yes, I mean, also as someone who worked for Native rights and we had alliances with, coming up as a poet, I came up at a really special time of the emergence of multicultural, even the idea, even the word concept, multicultural literature, multicultural presence, or, in a literary canon, which was unheard of. And I was lucky that I came up with that. So I came up with a lot of, wonderful people, and had great mentors, and Adrienne Rich and Scott Momaday and Audre Lorde, and came up, June Jordan, and came up next to Rita Dove and Sandra Cisneros and so many other people. And but it was despairing to see that, to see such violence against such racial violence and such division. But it also made me realize that there is a deep wounding in this country that is still, it's open. It's like been reopened, and the wound is deep and painful. And we've all been working through it, or we all have a part in reworking and finding a way. But it does, so I turned to poetry. I mean, I started writing this memoir, thinking about this and thinking about my generation and thinking about the children and the grandchildren following, so that the book ends with a dream I had, and in which I was carrying my 7th generation granddaughter into the world, into her story. And I looked at her in my my and beautiful little baby girl, and I told her, I said, "Oh, you look Japanese." And I said, "You look like your grandmother, my daughter Rainey," and beautiful girl. And I covered her, I carried her in my arms into her earth story. And that's how it ends, because somebody carried me in, just like somebody carried you. And everyone who's listening was, you were brought by helpers, you were brought by wisdom, you were brought carrying gifts into this world that will help us solve. We all have something that will help us solve and move this story ahead.
Okay. We're almost out of time. I'm trying to think if there's anything I can ask that will build on what you just said, which was so powerful. I guess
I will try to get on at least to say hello in person. We will see.
Come see if you can join back on the video.
I'm going to try. It says you're entering a broadcast studio, but we'll see. It's going really slow, and I've noticed the internet here gets really bad at night. But they came in and he said he fixed the computer so it would, have full, have the really excellent width. But it's not. I don't know that it's coming. It just says loading.
I think it's you know what, it's okay, because we still got your words, this whole time, and your words are so powerful that I think that everyone.
I'm backstage. Actually, I might be able to get on for a minute. If I am, I'll hate. Let's see.
Let her in.
Let me in. We'll see. And then I'll have to turn this off or turn it down. So, okay, I'm still backstage.
They're saying technically it's not showing up on their end that you're backstage.
Oh,
so
really?
It might not be working. But in the event that you can't you can't appear in person, which we all crave, but recognize if it's impossible technologically that technology is its own beast. Is there anything, building on what you were just saying, thinking about the 7 generations to come and thinking about youth encountering this book as part of the Big Read, and especially I feel like youth encountering poetry, like that description you had of playing, you know, on the typewriter, and that being how you create words. Is there anything that you would want to offer, I think, specifically?
There.
You're there.
Okay, here I am. Uh-oh.
You're there. I believe
Hello.
You're there now. Enjoy.
Well, I can't hear you.
You can hear me? Well.
Oh wait, there. Now I yes,
hear me?
I can hear you. Okay.
The final thing
but
I was. Oh, you're. If you can hear me, Joy, the final thing I was going to ask you to close with is just if you had anything to offer for the future generations of potential poets who might be listening.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
It's frozen again.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Now I can't.
Okay. What's the last part of that question?
It was just anything you have to offer the future generations of poets who might be listening.
Oh, just yeah. Just remember, there's a whole lot of ancestral poets that have formed, and you know, you talk about family is a large family, and we're all together. And just have to know that. Okay, my camera. Okay. Yes, the future poet, you know, we saw that during poetry. Did you?
Are you there, Joy? I hate the internet.
I'm with you, Maddie. We were so close. The anticipation this whole time. I feel
like the most important thing in the world was probably just said, and now I will never know what it is. And it just hit the internet like so much.
Come on! I know. I heard we're all together.
Yeah, I did too. And I heard that
Harjo's calling me. 1 second. Hi, Joy. You're on air.
Okay, good. Here I am. Sorry about that. I gave a long answer if it didn't get on there.
Is there any part of it that you want to share, knowing that we really wanted to hear it really badly, but that it was off in cyberspace?
Yes, I just wanted to tell the young poets that poetry absolutely matters, and their work as a poet is just as important as, say, a plumber or anyone else. That, you know, poets make these containers that hold these structures, these architectures that carry the words that come out of the words that there are no words for. That's how I think of poetry, is where there are no words for, but we have a place to hold our grief and our joy and our terror and all. We can hold them in poetry, and it's so important. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, and just keep walking and listening and bringing forth what we need to hear. And thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for bearing with me. And you know, I'm sorry the internet is, they promised me excellent internet, and actually it's been pretty good. It's, you know, it looks like it's pouring rain out there. So anyway, I'm glad I could be here with you, and I apologize for any of the technical difficulties.
We're grateful you were here with us, even amidst the storm. I know we all got so much out of it, even with the storm. So thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And thank you to everybody who stayed with us as we are moving through this. I think in times like this, mistakes with technology push us closer to our humanity and our ability to shift and move. So thank you. We're so looking forward to seeing you at future events where we get to keep talking about American Sunrise. We'll see you next week. With Listening to Earth, Indigenous Wisdom, and Climate Futures. This weekend, we're celebrating neighborhoods all across New Haven. Thank you. And please take the festival's audience survey. Let us know a little bit about you. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it's a huge help helping us understand our audience. And check out artidea.org/NEA Big Read to see other events centered on and exploring the themes of American Sunrise now through the end of June. Everything is free and open to all. Wishing you all a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night.
Picture me growing freely, no ceiling